Hello, welcome to CESMII Studios in our broadcast of 6 Degrees of Smart Manufacturing. I am Conrad Leiva.
And I'm Mike Yost.
And in this series, we cover different perspectives and topics on smart manufacturing from the many points of views of manufacturers, practitioners, engineers, integrators, consultants, educators, and researchers, the many people involved in this smart manufacturing journey. And today, we're having a 20-minute chat with our guest, Thorsten Wuest from West Virginia University, West from the West. You can use the Q&A to send us questions. However, we might have to answer later at our bonus reel or at our LinkedIn group, which we will give you that link at the end of the show.
Excellent. Thank you, Conrad. If you're new to our webcast, a lot of people ask us, what are we talking about when we're talking about 6 degrees of smart manufacturing? And it's based on the idea that we are responsible for getting as much knowledge as possible out and about from all those perspectives that Conrad mentioned to help make the knowledge available to make smart manufacturing a reality. So when we think in terms of 6 degrees of separation, where we're only 6 or fewer social connections away from knowing every person on the planet, we think we have to be just as close to being able to find the information we need by connecting with the people around us, all those different perspectives that Conrad was talking about. So that's why we do this, and that's why we have this format that we're engaging in with you right now. So as Conrad mentioned, we're really excited today to have Dr. Thorsten Wuest with us here today. He is an assistant professor of smart manufacturing and a faculty fellow in engineering at West Virginia University. Besides that, Thorsten, you can turn on your camera now, please, and join us. In addition to being a professor and a contributor within the CESMII domain, he's very well established in industry in a lot of areas, and most recently an author of the book you see on the left side of the screen, Digital Supply Networks. The CESMII CEO, John Dyck, wrote a supporting piece on that, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. And that caused Conrad and I to take notice and reach out to Thorsten and talk, as the topic of supply chain resiliency has come into focus so dramatically over the last several months. So Thorsten, we welcome you to our show today and look forward to engaging with you.
Thanks so much for having me, Mike and Conrad.
So, Thorsten, let's get started with this basic question. How does that digital supply network intersect with smart manufacturing? How does smart manufacturing look like from that perspective?
Well, let me take a step back and just smart manufacturing for me is that exciting opportunity to basically connect all the different islands that we see in the manufacturing space. And the connecting fabric here is data and the analytics we can apply on that variety of data we see. And what does that do? It frees up our human experts to do what they do best: creative problem solving, innovate, and react to problems that we have not seen before. In the previous definition of smart manufacturing, I believe the human ingenuity piece was an essential part. And I still believe that is the case. And how does that tie into digital supply networks and supply chain resiliency? Well, a lot of these problems we see today, this black swan event of COVID that we're struggling with right now, that is very hard to predict using data because it has not happened before. So to be resilient, we need to have creative problem solving. And when we think of the linear supply chain that we're used to, the data flow is also sequential to some extent. And the digital supply network does not fully replace the flow of goods, for example, but it introduces capabilities that bring together the different nodes that should be better connected, and the data flow can be organized in that capability fashion instead of just a sequential flow.
Well, and that's a great point, Thorsten. If I could read something from the foreword of your book, and have you comment about this, sort of the existing linear supply chain versus digital supply networks. In the forward, it says that in the new way of working, traditional chain will be replaced by an always on, always connected, transparent, dynamic network. We call this a digital supply network. So I guess what goes through my mind, a question I have is this completely new? Is this an evolution of where we've come from over the last 30 years, let's say? Is this something brand new and people have to rip and replace and start it?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. And whatever I say now, it can probably be ripped apart. I'm fully aware of that. But let me give you that answer. I believe it's both. On the impact side, I believe it's quite revolutionary because it changes really how we create, how we approach it. On the process side, it's probably more on the evolutionary side because technology in supply chain or in manufacturing is definitely not new. Like it was applied for a long time, and we have some nodes that are actually quite well developed. So those lighthouses can continue what they do, but we have to bring the other pieces up to speed. So in that sense, it's evolutionary there.
Well, I like the. I think we need to drill down on a couple of these characteristics here, but let's start with the smart factory. And can you make the link to us of how important it is to have smart factories in this supply network?
Well, I might be biased coming from manufacturing, but I believe it's one of the most important nodes here. Because when we don't know what's happening in our production or manufacturing facilities, how can we plan the delivery? How can we plan any of the other aspects like consumer satisfaction, on-time delivery, our schedules, and anything? We need to know what's happening on the shop floor. We need to know we can produce the right quality. We need to know where are we at any given point, and that happens on the connected smart factory.
Now, I know you have it singular here as a concept, but we're really talking smart factories, right? And plural. And so what happens if we have a mix of smart factories and not so smart factories? What happens there? Is we still have a digital supply chain, or?
Well, that's a good question, and let's think of the old weakest link metaphor that we always use in a sequential supply chain, where the weakest link would basically break the whole thing and define how effective the process is. In a network structure, we have a little bit more of a wiggle room there because one breaking node might not destroy the whole network. Nevertheless, I guess the effectiveness of the whole system when there's one critical node, and that again, it depends which node it is that is not up to speed, can significantly impact the outcome. We see that in the automotive supply chain quite a bit, right? The higher you go closer to the OEM, the more important it is that the factory is smart and connected to the final output. But the screw manufacturer who provides like a commodity type of product might not be as essential. However, in an ideal world, we would like to have all the factories being smart.
Well, and that, I mean, you're singing my song now. I grew up in the automotive supply chain, Thorsten, on the technology side, and I think I certainly agree with everything you said. And to Conrad's point, there were a lot of places where it wasn't necessarily technology that was leveraged to strengthen that link. It was contracts, it was buffer inventories, it was all sorts of duct tape and baling twine to help us if we get caught, because in those cases specifically, you're talking about significant fines if you're missing your shipments, not delivering them on time in sequence and those sorts of things. So I think from an ingenuity perspective, manufacturers will find a way to band-aid the problem and get things done. But that misses the opportunity. You just talked about the revolutionary possibilities of digital supply networks and smart manufacturing, certainly from our perspective. You're missing that if you're not taking advantage of some of these advances in technologies.
But let me add one point here that I have been thinking a lot about, and we have that also covered to some extent in the book. There we call it optimal degree of automation, I believe. And there we looked into, is it always the end goal to have a fully automated process? And I would argue no. It depends. Like, what is your process? Do you have a highly diverse set of products that you manufacture? Batch size is one. The end goal would be that we have robots that can adapt like a human, but we are not there yet, and I doubt that we will be, because it's just not necessary, right? So in any supply chain, we have to figure out what's the optimal degree of smartness of the shop floor, probably. And I saw the last webcast, I believe, with your truth table, which is a great methodology to probably approach something like that.
Well, thanks. And I want to remind everybody to go watch that episode too. But let's drill down here a little more on this intelligent supply, because Mike mentioned this concept of always connected, and always on, always connected. And I want to know, are we there yet? Are we here yet? Do we have this intelligent supply process? Are there companies that are really
some are, some are not, as always, I guess. There's always some leaders that are extremely good at that, and we can probably think of an Amazon or a Tesla to be pretty good at that, in a sense that they are born digital, right? So they have that in their DNA, while other companies are more used to the supply flow, and this traditional, I talk to my supplier, they figure out how they get their supply, and so on and so forth, which of course takes a long time. I mean, just recently I had a conversation with a logistics provider, and literally they get their data on paper, scan it, send it to a low-wage country across the globe. They type it off by hand and send it back, basically in their database. Not only does that media change introduce a lot of potential errors, but imagine the time lag between recording the information and being able to use it, because you need it in a digital and semantically correct format to be able to get insights from it.
Yeah, that's what I'm still thinking, that I'm on the phone like yelling, hey, where's my part? Where's my material? Especially these days. And let's talk about how this plays into resiliency. If we jump to the outcome side here, the right side of this diagram here, under proactive supplier management, I think that's where your book would fit in risk management and the concept of the resilient supply chain. And I'm wondering, how does this ecosystem, this digital ecosystem, help us be more resilient?
Yeah, let me just go back. Like, our book was 2 years in the making, so we didn't know that this black swan event will happen. And quite frankly, we're torn between, like, is it good for the book or bad? I think the topic is very current, but it's also it provided some supply chain issues for us with the publisher and getting the books to the right sources and all. Surprisingly, but coming back to the proactive supplier management and how that ties into resilience, I believe it's crucial, because when you're flying blind and you don't know what your supplier is doing, how their status is at any point, how can you take your own actions and basically say, this port in let's say China, as that was an example earlier in this pandemic, cannot deliver because they don't ship. Well, at the early we know, we can try to find alternatives, kettle balls or toilet paper, a lot of PPE, a lot of examples where we were surprised by shortages. And not saying that it will solve it directly, because first of all, we have to find the resources and capabilities in other places, but we have more time to do that. And that directly ties into resilience in my mind. That's probably the core aspect there that I would point out.
It brings up issues. I mean, I've lived for a long time in trying to get people to share data. So my mind goes to the value and the power of what you're talking about, right? But it requires people to share data, right? right?
Trust.
And trust that the data is safe and secure. And at the simplest level, I've seen a lot of people not trust data, not so much that they feel it's going to be stolen, but if my boss or another department sees those real performance numbers, then that's going to negatively impact me. So there's a distrust of the data.
And there's a lot of conversation going on, and a lot of companies feel the pressure of saying like, oh, data is the new oil. We need to protect it. We need to treat it like a valuable resource. And I 100% agree that it is. But a lot of companies have not yet figured out how that resource can be transformed in whatever oil does, like energy or plastics or whatever upper stream, higher value products, right? In the data sense, insights that create value for the company.
Right.
And I mean, you bring that point up, and I think, well, who owns this data? So in order to make to work on supply chain problems, we need to share data. So have we figured out all the balance of sharing and protection of data, and how is that working in the supply chain?
Well, that is a problem I cannot solve for you. This is an ongoing discussion and the ongoing problem that trust and that ownership of data, and also who benefits from the data. In a supply chain, in a supply chain, a traditional one that is set and that runs for a while in the same constellation, you can figure that out contractually. And it's partly done, not to the extent it probably should, but it can be done. In a network, which is more agile and can rearrange itself in an ecosystem fashion, this has to be done on the spot, ideally, and then figure out, okay, when we provide data and you benefit from it, do we get a share of the profit? What do we have from it, right? Or what could be the problem when I share this data? Can you anticipate that our production rate fell and that will impact our stock price? What Mike mentioned before, there might be impacts outside of the direct supply related issues when it comes to sharing vast amounts of data. People are very creative in getting insights from data. So it is valuable and it's risky.
Some of the scenarios I've seen, right? Data straight from sensors and equipment are people want to push that data straight into some supply chain scenarios. And I'm wondering if you're seeing more of that. That's definitely the kind of thing and that we want to support here at CESMII with tying in these whole supply chains. And how is that, what is that mix? Because that data straight from equipment, I mean, we need context on it, but do you see that we're moving more from aggregated and batch data to more real-time contextualized data?
I would like to say I see more of that. Let me say I would like to see more of that, because I believe that's how it should be and how the future is. A big hurdle is still contextualization, like the semantics and the automated data flow. And that's where CESMII, I guess, has a crucial role as a kind of neutral party that can broker that and provide the tools across an industry or even across different industries to lower the barrier of contextualizing and providing these APIs and data flows and schematics and so on, together with standardization companies like OAGIS or something like that provide that context and allow us to provide real data from the sensor without having somebody pre-processing it and probably altering it and taking context out because they believe it's not important. They don't know, because it might be important to somebody else along the line, right? And that's a big problem.
Yeah, well, that's absolutely a thrust from a CESMII perspective as it applies to the context off of manufacturing operations. We believe completely your point of data is the new oil, but without the context, we think it's just never going to scale. And
it's an oil spill, right? And we have a new Exxon Valdez of data. Huh?
Yeah. As is historically my role here, I have to play time police and move us forward. We definitely don't want to have any conversations about technology without talking about business strategy and how it impacts the business. And so we are going to take this conversation about the business strategy and connecting it with the resilient supply chains and digital supply networks into our bonus reel segment. So I'd encourage everybody to check our website and our YouTube channel, and you will be able to watch as we continue this conversation and dig more into the business strategy side of things. So with that, just Thorsten, if you could take us out here, just give everybody a quick synopsis of what you think about today's topic.
Well, first of all, obviously, I want you all to buy the book and learn from it. But aside from that, I believe the key message that I want to convey to the listeners today is don't feel like you can just buy technology and have your supply chain transformed. Smart manufacturing is really a journey, and you mentioned journey before. You cannot buy smart manufacturing. You have to earn it.
I like
love
that.
Definitely love that, and agree completely. So, well,
and it is a good book.
Yeah, that's right. Please, absolutely, do buy the book. So, well, again, thank you, Thorsten, for joining us here. We'll continue the conversation. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here live today. And as Conrad mentioned at the beginning, we will continue this conversation within our LinkedIn group. So I encourage everybody to go there. If you're not already a member of that group, please request to join and we will let you in. This is just the beginning of the conversation. This conversation is very relevant, very timely. We're going to continue this conversation on supply chains and supply chain resiliency.
Yeah, and actually August 26th, we're going to have CEO of CESMII, John Dyck, here talking about what's happening at a national level, the national initiatives on supply chain resilience, where CESMII is playing a role there. And we will continue in September with talking about the resilient supply chain, because we feel this is a very important topic right now.
Sure is.
Excellent.
So if you want to follow up on these topics, here's our email, and please follow us on YouTube and the LinkedIn group.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks again, everybody. Take care. Have a wonderful day.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening.